Okay, we out here. Set. Everything looks good.
Set.
Everything's running wonderful.
Dab set. Hold on. Dab 1, dab 2.
Dab 1, dab 2.
Yeah, that's how we get everything lined up on.
Absolutely.
Action!
You gotta stretch to the edges of the corners of the frame. Absolutely.
That's it. Make sure.
This camera looks kind of legit from the front. I've never seen it from the front.
This is the
Yeah,
first.
you don't get to see the side of it, huh?
Yeah, I know.
The first
right?
side. It's definitely different.
It is different. So we're talking today's topic, endurance. I think that when I wrote it in the group chat, the thing that got me was that people are quick to start things, but then as soon as the incline gets too steep, that's it. And that's a spiritual thing, that's a social thing, that's a business thing, you know. We as a group of people, we've started companies together individually, like all the different things, and we've had our spiritual lives too. And the thing that sets people apart from each other is their endurance in the things that they decide to do. Where it's like, if you make a decision, spiritually or economically or whatever, enduring the test that decision makes is very important. You know, it's sad to see a lot of people with a lot of potential who are really talented people who just can't get the job done because they get bored or they get tired or they hit the hill and they just collapse because they're like, oh, if it was supposed to happen, it wouldn't be this hard. You know, and that's really sad.
There are some companies that find success, and there's some people that find success not because they're the best, but because they outlasted the competition. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Dave Ramsey, who's an amazing financial consultant, he's been around forever, and he says, I'm on, I think it was like 1,500 radio stations across the United States and around the world, and he has millions of listeners every episode, and he said, it's not because I'm better than everybody else. It's because I've been here for 20 years, and I'm here every single day for 20 years. He says, that's the only thing that separates me from people. He said, there were better people than me who knew more about money than I do, who just didn't last as long.
When we had one of our previous shows, we were talking about a preacher whose name was Charles Capps, and he was talking about 100-fold return. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that specific talk?
Yeah, absolutely. Charles Capps was talking about this businessman who was complaining. He was all like, oh, you know, the Bible says that if I give my tithe, I'm going to get 100-fold return. And, you know, I'm still in the same financial position I was 10 years ago. Like, what happened 20 years ago? And he's all like, well, look around you. 20 years ago, how many businesses were there on your street? And he said there were like 10 or 12 or whatever. He's like, how many businesses are there today? He said, there's just me. He says, that's your 100-fold return. As humans, we like to see results. You know, when you plant a plant, and this is why we have issues with root plants, because you like to see the thing flowering. So you water it every day, and you want to see the little green plant, and then you want to see the orange develop and everything like that, and that's fun because you see the progress. But when there's things on the inside, when it's below ground, we get afraid of it. And that's why, like, whenever you plant, like, onions, you always pull them out too early because you're like, oh, it's been long enough, right? They're developed already, and then you pull it out, and it's, like, that big, and it's like, oh, that's not an onion. And it's like, that's what we do with our lives. That's what a lot of people do with their lives, where they're like, they think that the project is going to be so much simpler and so much easier and so much shorter than it actually is. And there's this thing that goes like, Tyler was explaining it for firewood, but it's a bunch of things. Collect as much firewood as you think you need, and then collect 3 times as much. And it's the same thing with projects. When it's like, estimate the time and the cost of a project and double it and triple it. It's like, how much time and how much effort you think it's going to take, it's going to be way more than that. And if people really took the time and the effort to think of those things, people would start a lot less projects, people would fail at a lot less things, people would attempt a lot less things. But the things that they did attempt, they would probably reach their goal a lot easier.
What would you say to the person right now who's listening to this and they feel like their business plan or their ministry or their spiritual life or whatever they're developing in their secret place, they feel like it's underground and it's developing? How would you encourage this person?
Sometimes any advice that you get for endurance, everybody hates it. Because all it is you just got to put your nose to the grindstone. That's not fun. That's not a happy piece of advice. That's not go put it all on black and everything's going to be fine. It's not quick, it's not easy, it's not pull the trigger and that's it. It's a process. Everything takes time. And the only thing that you're achieving by ripping the onions out of the ground before they're done is you're destroying all of the progress that's already been made. Mm-hmm. That's all you're doing. By starting a project and not finishing it, you're wasting time, you're wasting resources, and you're wasting sometimes the time and resources of the people around you too. And that's not a reason to not do projects. That's not a reason to not delve deeper in your spiritual life. That's a reason to double down on the things you've already started. Think of all of the things that you've started. What can you handle on your plate right now? If you can handle one project, find the project that you love the most, double down on it. Work harder on it. It's going to take 2 to 3 times as long as you think it's going to take. But if you love it as much as you think you love it, then it's worth that time and that effort.
If there's somebody that's holding on to a promise from God and they're about to give up, what can you talk to them about faith?
Faith and endurance are those 2 big things. There has to be a faith. The farming is used so many times in the Bible because that's what faith is. Farming is, I don't see what's happening. I don't see what's happening, but I have to trust that something is going on. It's the same thing that our bodies, our bodies, we physically get up every single day expecting our bodies to do the jobs that we do. Why do you eat food? You don't see what's happening when you eat food, but still you're alive and you're working and you're doing your day-to-day lives and you still eat food because you have faith that food is fulfilling the process that it has to fulfill. It's the same thing with everything else in our lives. If you got a promise that you wholeheartedly believe was from God, then you have to have faith in the promise. That's the tough part. It's not easy. None of this is easy. It's a simple concept. It's not easy to do. And holding on and grabbing on and delving deeper. And the easiest way, the best way to fight that doubt or that lack of endurance is to double down and to dive deeper into it. Because the more you dive into it, the more you immerse yourself in it, the less time you're going to have for outside influence and outside doubt to develop and to take root.
We talk a lot about investing in Plan A. Do you have any thoughts to share about that?
Oh yeah, we talk about that all the time. I used to do this a lot, and my mantra became, if Plan A is what you want, only invest in Plan A. To me, there is no Plan B. Because Plan B to me is, if Plan A fails, figure something out in the moment. That's Plan B. Because if, let's say, you have a scale of 100% of your value, and you make a decision on Plan A, and Plan A takes 80% of your value to accomplish. If you had given 80%, you would have accomplished A. And you gave 75% to Plan A and 25% to Plan B. If you had just taken that 25% and invested it into Plan A, it would have happened. But because you diverted time and resources and effort, it caused Plan A to fail. We rely so much on the safety net that we forget what we're actively doing. We're on the tightrope of life, on the tightrope of our project, of our spirituality, and we're relying more, we're thinking more on the safety net than we are on the tightrope that we're supposed to be walking on. And that's a failure point that a lot of people have.
We've had a conversation previously about if the maker of the universe, God himself, asks you to do something and it seems like a risk, is it really a risk?
Mm-hmm. That's so true. On one of our other shows, we had this conversation. We said we have more faith in people than we have in God. All of us, not you in on the other side of this camera. All of us, we have more faith in people than we do in God, because you work 40 hours a week expecting that your boss is going to pay you after you've worked. You have faith in that, because if you didn't have faith in that, you wouldn't show up. We used the hypothetical example of Jeff Bezos, who was the richest man in the world at the time. He's no longer, unfortunately. If he gave you his personal credit card and he said, we have a 200-person party, go buy food for that event, you would gladly go and purchase the food, and you would have no hesitation thinking that that credit card wouldn't pass. But if God asks you, hey, go give that person $50, you start saying, God, but I don't know if I'm going to have the $50 for my bills. I don't know if I'm going to have the money that I need to go shopping. all of these things, we believe in people more than we believe in God. And that's a dangerous position for the body of Christ.
Do you have any closing statements?
Endurance is tough. And it's not something that you gain right away. You look at bodybuilders. You look at Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was at his prime. He was this big, buff dude. That guy didn't have it right from the beginning. You gain endurance over time. You start with the small things and you develop over time. It's not something that you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to be the endurance master and you're going to fix every issue that you've ever had in your life. It's tomorrow, I'm a little bit better than I was today. And the day after that, I'm a little bit better than I was the day before. And then 20 years, 10 years, 5 years down the line, that's when you notice the big change.
To conclude this, let's marry faith and endurance, and talking about how faith is a muscle.
Faith is a muscle is the best way to say it. It's all of these things. In the physical world, we have to remember that the physical world is a physical representation of the spiritual world around us. And that sounds very complicated, and that's not really the scope of this topic, but it's important that we see the muscles in our body are physical representations of what faith is. It's if you don't use this muscle, it's going to die. It's going to wither up and it's going to die, just based off of usage. The more you lift, the more you do curls, the more these muscles are gonna grow, because they grow from usage. Faith is the same way. If you have no reason to have any faith in anything, when the hard times come, you're not gonna have faith. You have to have faith in the small things. When God asks you to do something small, you have to go and do that thing out of faith. And if you don't rely on that faith in the small things, you're never gonna be able to rely on it in the big things. So when God asks you, if God asks you to give $5 to somebody and you don't do that, and then you cry and you say, God, why don't you call me to go help the orphan children in India? It's because you don't have the physical strength of your faith to be able to go and do those things. It's a very clear cause and effect scenario. We can't cry about not being given more weight to carry when we can't carry the small amount of weight that we already have.
Is there anything else?
That's it. I don't want this idea to be a sad thing, because it's like saying somebody like me to go and be a bodybuilder. It's like the road is long and it's tough and it's difficult and it's going to be painful and it's going to be time consuming. But if that's something that you want, then you can achieve it. If you want a deeper spiritual connection with God, then you have to actively participate in it. It's not going to show up one day and you're not going to be the next Moses overnight, because that doesn't happen. Because even Moses had to prove his faith to God before he got to see the back of God and go and do all of these things, you know. It's important that we realize that this is a process. Everything in life is a process. And don't be afraid to do the process if you want to achieve the end result.
That